Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates and notifications. Hello everyone, I am conducting another investigation. The protagonist of the story is named Anu. At the time of the incident, she was 25 years old and was born in India. Anu's parents, Patty and Suming, are both doctors. When Anu was 2 years old, the family immigrated to Australia and settled in Sydney's Strathfield. As a child, Anu was very dependent on her parents and always liked to be around them, even when sleeping. She couldn't sleep without them. Compared to her peers, Anu was more mature. Starting from her teens, Anu often dressed revealingly and hung out with some boys. Anu's parents gradually became worried and even considered keeping their daughter at home, but they did not do so. Fortunately, Anu did well in her studies. After graduating from high school, Anu successfully entered university, and her plain life was about to be disrupted. At the age of 19, Anu left Sydney and came to the unfamiliar city of Canberra alone. Canberra is the capital and largest inland city in Australia, located in the southeastern mountainous region. With a population of over 400,000 people in the valley, Canberra is an elegant and modern city with distinct seasons throughout the year and is known as the Garden City of Oceania. Canberra is located 300 kilometres southwest of Sydney. The school she attended is the Australian National University in Canberra, which is a public research university and the only national public university in the country. All other public universities are state-owned. Anu is studying for a double degree in economics and law here. In the eyes of others, Anu has a bright future, but for Anu, university life is a big challenge. In her first year at university, Anu did not perform well and found it difficult to adapt to life in a foreign land. She missed her days in Sydney and her family very much. Anu frequently called home, sometimes 5 or 6 times a day. She also went home every weekend. In high school, Anu had started smoking marijuana. Just half a year after starting university, Anu was involved in a traffic accident, but fortunately she was not seriously injured. Considering Anu's performance at school and her strong attachment to home, her father suggested that she take a break and return to Sydney to rest and adjust before going back to school. So, Anu chose to take a leave of absence and returned home, postponing her studies for a year. After a year, Anu returned to the campus in Canberra. She started dating a man named Simon, and this relationship was very important to Anu, giving her a positive outlook on life. Since then, Anu's academic progress went smoothly. She first obtained a bachelor's degree in economics and then continued to study law. However, Anu's romantic experiences were not smooth sailing. Her relationship with her boyfriend Simon also brought her pain. After an accidental pregnancy, Anu chose to have an abortion, which had an impact on her. Anu often went back to Sydney to visit her parents. During one of these visits, she met a man named Joe, who she got along well with and began dating. At the time, Anu was still in a relationship with Simon. After staying in Sydney for a few days, she had to return to Canberra to continue her classes, which began her long-distance relationship with Joe. Simon was also in Canberra. Over time, Simon became aware of Anu's infidelity, and eventually he broke up with her. This was a major event for Anu, especially given Simon's comments about her intelligence, which hurt her deeply. After the breakup, Anu's academic performance began to decline, and she started focusing on her appearance and figure. Anu enjoyed spending hours at the gym. In order to maintain her figure, Anu had become obsessed with drugs and unhealthy eating habits. She even told her friends that she would rather die than become fat, and often excessively starved herself to control her weight. But this did not stop Anu's pursuit of weight loss. She often showed her sagging skin to her parents, claiming that it was all fat. She insisted that she was fat, even though her weight at the time was only 40 kilograms. Anu also asked her parents for money several times as she wanted to undergo liposuction surgery, but later gave up on the idea. During the painful period after her breakup, Joe was always by her side. Joe was born in June 1971, 1 year older than Anu. He had a younger brother who was 4 years younger than him. His mother Maria and father Nino were both Italian immigrants. The family of 4 lived happily in Newcastle, New South Wales. Newcastle is built around a harbour on the east coast of Australia, with a long history, rich cultural traditions, and beautiful natural scenery. Newcastle is also the world's largest coal export port. It is located 500 kilometres southwest of Canberra, where Anu is, and requires a 5-hour drive. Joe is not only outgoing but also excels in academics and loves sports. During his time at university, he often participated in sports activities and was a popular person. At the age of 24, Joe graduated from university with a degree in civil engineering. After graduation, he traveled to Europe for 2 months and then returned to Newcastle to live with his family. He found a job at a local civil engineering company. The family lived happily together, and dinner time was the most heartwarming moment for them every day. They sat around the dinner table and shared their lives. However, everything changed after Anu appeared. Every evening at 6 o'clock was Joe's family's dinner time, but now it was occupied by Anu, which caused the family to frequently miss dinner together. Anu would call him every night and each conversation would last for over an hour, which made his family members feel left out. His parents were very unhappy with Anu taking up the time they used to spend eating dinner with Joe. Joe's parents were very unhappy with this situation. They valued the time spent together during dinner. Therefore, Joe's parents suggested that Anu delay their phone calls and only call for as long as she was willing to after dinner time. At first, Anu followed this suggestion but soon forgot about it and started calling Joe during dinner time again. Joe was deeply fascinated by Anu, and whenever he received a call from her, he would put down what he was doing and focus on talking to her. In addition to frequent phone calls, Joe would even drive 5 hours every week, early in the morning, from Newcastle to Canberra, which was 500 kilometers away. He would stay in Canberra for a day or two, and then quickly return to Newcastle to continue working. He went through so much trouble just to spend the weekend with Anu. Gradually, Joe's parents noticed that their son had changed completely. It seemed like he was being controlled by Anu. This change made Joe's parents very uneasy, and they advised him not to be controlled by Anu. However, this had no effect on Joe's feelings for Anu. Finally, after 1 year of being together, Joe decided to move to Canberra to live with Anu. Joe lived in apartment 19 at Anti Street, a Canberra suburb where many university students reside. It is 5 kilometers away from Anu's school. Although their relationship is stable, Anu's condition is gradually deteriorating. She always feels like there is something wrong with her body, complaining of leg pain, hot flashes, and discomfort all over her body. Anu often paces around her room at night, sometimes even crying, with issues such as eating disorders, anxiety, insomnia, and other problems. Anu thinks she is suffering from muscle atrophy and complains of chronic fatigue syndrome. She always feels feverish and as if something is crawling under her skin. Sometimes she even feels like her head is not attached to her neck. Anu's father tells her that she has a mental illness and must see a doctor, but Anu refuses to acknowledge that she has a mental problem and believes that it is just a temporary physical issue. Anu's mental condition is getting worse, and her mood swings are sudden. She can be happy 1 second and suddenly become emotionally depressed, even crying. Anu feels desperate and has seen many doctors, including a psychiatrist, but she does not accept the diagnosis of having a mental illness. Anu's condition does not improve. Anu began to miss classes at school regularly, and when she did attend, she was unable to focus. This was inconsistent with her reputation among her peers as a perfect student. Anu started discussing suicide with people and would sometimes lock herself in her room for up to 2 weeks. Since her early 20s, Anu's parents had gradually become aware of her mental health issues. Although they did not want to admit it, they silently helped her. They contacted some experts, such as the mental health crisis team in Canberra, but without Anu's consent, the crisis team could not provide any help. Anu's mental state continued to deteriorate. She once thought she had contracted HIV while her boyfriend Joe had not, which she believed was unfair. She even had the idea of nailing herself to Joe's toothbrush to infect him too. However, the test report showed that Anu was not infected with HIV. Later, Anu believed that she had a degenerative disease and insisted that she would lose her ability and eventually die. She attributed all these problems to her boyfriend, who had been accompanying her all the time. It started when Joe mentioned a drug called Tugon in a conversation. Tugon is a plant extract that can be used for diuretic and emetic purposes and has a weight loss effect. Anu started using a drug called Tugon after learning about it from her boyfriend and gradually developed a dependence on it. She blamed the drug addiction for making her feel uncomfortable and causing her to suffer from various illnesses, all of which were imagined by Anu. Anu had confided in friends that she wanted to kill her current boyfriend Joe, her ex-boyfriend Simon, and all the doctors who diagnosed her with mental illness. 2 months ago, Anu had talked to a friend several times about wanting to end her life. Anu had a friend named Madhavi, and they had read books about suicide together in the library. At this point, Anu seemed to have started getting rid of her belongings. Their father discovered Anu's clothes in the car trunk while washing the car, and the tags indicated that the clothes would be sold for $1 or $2. Anu's colleagues also started giving away some of their belongings to friends. When their parents asked Anu why they were doing this, they just said they don't go out and don't need these things. Initially, Anu considered using a gun, but later changed her mind and decided to use illegal drugs. Later, Anu bought heroin from a male law student for $500 and filled 2 syringes with the drug. The male student was curious about why Anu needed so much, and after questioning her, Anu revealed that she planned to end her life with someone else. Her classmates immediately advised her to calm down and not do anything foolish, but it was all in vain. Anu then found another woman named Brown and obtained some sleeping pills from her. She then contacted Madhavi and told him about her plan. The two of them began preparing to murder Joe. Madhavi helped Anu practice injecting into her arm, perhaps in pursuit of some sense of ritual. After all the preparations were made, Anu planned to hold a farewell party for herself and her boyfriend. She and her friend Madhavi invited some law students to attend the party. Before the party began, Madhavi showed her arm to the guests, explaining that it was a practice injection left by Anu on her arm. This was the practice she did for killing Joe tonight. Anu also confided to her friends that she and Joe had made a pact to commit suicide together. On October 20th, 1997, a Monday, Anu held the farewell party as planned. About 10 people attended the party, but surprisingly no one discussed Anu's suicide pact, and no one informed the law school students present about the possible crime that had occurred. Everything looked normal at the party. Anu and her boyfriend appeared very sweet in front of their friends. Perhaps they were deceived by this appearance, and no one believed that such a loving couple would choose to commit suicide. So they took Anu's words as a joke because he did it just to get attention. After the party ended, everyone left. Anu began to carry out his evil plan. He first mixed sleeping pills into the discarded coffee to make sure he wouldn't resist. Then he injected heroin into Joe. Fortunately, due to the insufficient dosage, Joe escaped the danger. The next day, when he woke up feeling groggy and disoriented, Joe had no idea that Anu had drugged him. He assumed he had simply had too much to drink at the party the night before. It all seemed like just a bad hangover. The first plan had failed, but a few days later on Friday, October 24th, 1999, Anu hosted another farewell party. Those invited to the party still didn't take Anu's words too seriously. Nobody tried to alert anyone, and they all participated in the party as if nothing was happening. Maybe some of them were truly worried that Anu might do something out of line, but in the end, nobody did anything. Most people thought Anu's suicide idea was just a passing thought, and the party ended peacefully as everyone expected. But the true tragedy was about to happen after everyone had left. At 3:30 in the morning, everyone had left the party except Anu, Joe, and Madhavi. Anu began to put his plan into action again. As on the first night of the party, Anu first took a few sleeping pills, mixed them into the coffee he was making, and then injected Joe with a syringe. I was there witnessing Anu's actions. Between 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. the next morning, Madhavi left the scene and went home. One of the friends who attended the party stayed overnight at Madhavi's house. After returning home, Madhavi told his friends about Anu's attempt to murder Joe after the party, but failed. This friend immediately called Anu to inquire about the matter and threatened to report it to the police. However, Anu pleaded with him repeatedly, saying that this would ruin his and Joe's lives. With Anu and Madhavi's strong opposition, this friend did not report it to the police. At this time, Anu found out that Joe was still alive but unconscious, and called his friend Madhavi to come over. Later, the two had an argument, with Anu pushing all the responsibility onto Madhavi. Madhavi left in anger. A day later, Joe still showed no signs of life. Anu drove to pick up Madhavi and brought him back home. Joe lay still in bed with blue lips, but still breathing. Anu and David went out to get some money and came back home. Anu injected Joe's body again. At this point, only Anu and Joe were in the room. Madhavi had already left Anu and was watching Joe lying unconscious in bed. At noon, Anu called Brown, who had provided the sleeping pills, and asked what to do if someone overdosed on sleeping pills. Brown thought Anu was crazy and told him to call 000 emergency services right away. But Anu said, "I can't. He doesn't know and he'll be angry." Although Anu did not mention who had overdosed on sleeping pills, Brown had guessed it was Anu's boyfriend Joe. Brown asked about Joe's condition and told Anu to perform artificial respiration on him. After Anu hung up, he followed Brown's instructions. But after about 20 seconds, Anu said it wasn't working. Brown said he needed to have the will to keep trying to perform artificial respiration until Joe responded. Anu hung up and continued to follow Brown's instructions, but a few seconds later, Anu picked up the phone again. At this point, Anu screamed and said it was too late. Joe was gone. Brown told Anu that if she called an ambulance, Joe would be okay. But Anu refused to call emergency services and insisted that Brown come to his house. Because Brown knew some of Anu's intention, Brown said that by the time he arrived on the scene, Joe might not be able to hold on any longer. Then, Brown changed his mind and said that he didn't need to come over and just needed help to call an ambulance. Brown asked Anu for her address, but Anu refused to tell him, so Brown told Anu to call the ambulance herself. After hanging up the phone, Anu called Brown again 20 seconds later, saying that she couldn't make the emergency call. Brown advised her that if she didn't make the call, she would face murder charges, but if she did, her boyfriend might be angry when he woke up. Finally, with Brown's persuasion, Anu decided to call for emergency help. At noon on the 30th hour of Joe's torment, she finally made the emergency call, and blood was everywhere. Joe's breathing had slowed down, and he only breathed once every 10 seconds, accompanied by symptoms of chills in his lips. The operator asked for Anu's name and address, and she said her name was Olivia, and she lived at number 30 on Anti-Street.
Can I get an ambulance, please? I have a person potentially overdosed on heroin.
Potentially overdosed.
Well, he's not. He's vomiting everywhere, blood and stuff.
And all of these were false information. After the operator repeatedly asked Anu for her real address, it greatly delayed the ambulance's arrival time. When the ambulance arrived, Anu appeared very anxious. She frantically urged the paramedics into the house and explained Joe's condition. After a series of resuscitation efforts, everything was too late, and Joe eventually passed away. At this point, Anu began to scream hysterically. "This should not have happened. We were supposed to go together. I can't believe it." She leaned over Joe's body and repeatedly said, "Don't leave me." The police also arrived on the scene and tried to take Anu away from the body. The cause of Joe's death was determined after a forensic examination, which showed that he had ingested vomit while under the influence of multiple drugs, leading to suffocation. That night, the police tried to calm Anu down, who appeared to be anxious but still very clear-headed. At 10 p.m., Anu's father came to the police station, and upon seeing him, Anu began to cry uncontrollably. She crossed her arms and kept asking where he was. On October 28, 1997, the trial of the case began, and Anu was charged with murder. Madhavi was accused of being an accomplice, and was initially scheduled to be tried together in the same trial, but this process was later terminated. The judge stated that there were some issues with the evidence that made it difficult to determine whether it was related to Anu or Madhavi. Subsequently, the trials for both individuals were separated. During the trial, Anu's defense team presented evidence to suggest that she suffered from a mental illness at the time of the crime, as mental health experts diagnosed her with narcissistic personality disorder. The prosecution presented evidence that Anu had discussed various suicide methods with friends and had determined the means to cause death. Anu acted rationally and decisively that night, with the intention of causing the death of the victim. In June 1996, the judge found that Anu had a mental illness. The court handed down a verdict of guilty for Anu Singh of manslaughter and sentenced her to 10 years in prison with a non-parole period of 4 years, while the defendant Madhavi was acquitted. As one lawyer described during the trial, Madhavi was like a doorstep to Anu. In fact, Anu had only 4 years left to serve on her sentence after being detained for several years prior. 2 years after the verdict, Anu was granted parole at the age of 29. During this time, Anu obtained a master's degree in criminology from the University of Sydney. After her release from prison, Anu entered the law school at the University of Sydney and eventually earned a PhD in law. ANU's doctoral thesis was on the analysis of female criminality and the underlying reasons. ANU's life continued after her release, while unfortunately, Joe lost his life. After her release, ANU begged for forgiveness from Joe's parents and stated that there was no reason why she had to kill Joe. She said it was like doing a university assignment, This case was subsequently turned into a novel and a movie, bringing ANU back into the public eye. Whenever she goes out, ANU is afraid of being recognized. The thoughts she had when she committed the crime are something that only she can understand, and others cannot comprehend. Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates and notifications.